Welcome to SC-300 Practice Exam 4, Applications and Workload Identities. You will work through 45 original identity and access administration questions using the Identity Access dossier. Read each scenario and every requirement. After the answer choices, you will hear, "Lock in your answer." Then you get exactly 3 seconds of silence. Pause if you need more time. The review gives the complete correct answer, a concise mechanism-focused explanation, and an exam clue. Question 1 of 45. Select one answer. Contoso has configured SAML single sign-on and automatic provisioning for a Gallery SaaS application. Provisioning succeeds, and the SaaS accounts use each employee's mail attribute as the immutable account key. During sign-in, Microsoft Entra records a successful authentication, but the SaaS application rejects the assertion because its name ID contains user principal name instead of mail. What should the application identity engineer do? Option A. In the enterprise application's provisioning mappings, change the SCIM username target attribute and restart the provisioning job. Option B. In the enterprise application's SAML attributes and claims configuration, edit the name identifier value so that name ID is sourced from the user mail attribute. Option C. In the app registration, add the SaaS assertion consumer service URL as a web redirect URI. Option D. In the app registration, add a delegated API permission for user.read and grant tenant-wide admin consent. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is B. In the enterprise application's SAML attributes and claims configuration, edit the name identifier value so that name ID is sourced from the user mail attribute. The decisive evidence is inside the SAML assertion. Authentication succeeds, provisioning succeeds, and the vendor rejects the username because name ID uses the wrong source attribute. Microsoft Entra supports editing the name identifier value in the enterprise application's SAML claims configuration. Mapping name ID to the populated mail attribute aligns the assertion with the SaaS account key without changing provisioning, OAuth permissions, or redirect settings. Exam clue. Trace the failing protocol plane. A SCIM account mapping issue is repaired in provisioning, while a SAML subject or attribute mismatch is repaired in the enterprise application's SAML claims configuration. Question 2 of 45. Select one answer. Fabricam has set users can register applications to no. A developer must create app registrations for a modernization project and manage the registrations that the developer creates. The developer must not receive tenant-wide management access to all app registrations or enterprise applications. Which Microsoft Entra role should the application identity engineer assign? Option A, Application Developer. Option B, Cloud Application Administrator. Option C, Directory Readers. Option D, Owner of an existing enterprise application. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is A, Application Developer. Application Developer is the least privileged built-in role for this boundary. It allows a user to create app registrations even when users can register applications is no, and the creator is added as owner of the new application and service principal. The broader application administrator role would grant unnecessary tenant-wide application management. Exam clue. Separate create as owner permission from tenant-wide app administration. When self-service registration is disabled, but a developer should own only newly created apps, use the role whose create permission makes the creator an owner. Question 3 of 45. Select two answers. Contoso has Workload Identities Premium. A report-only conditional access policy directly targets the single-tenant service principal, billing daemon, and all resources. Billing Daemon is allowed to request tokens only from the headquarters and disaster recovery public egress addresses. The policy currently includes any location, excludes a trusted named location containing only the headquarters address, and uses block access. Service Principal sign-in logs show that disaster recovery token requests would be blocked, while requests from other public addresses would also be blocked. Which two actions should the application identity engineer take to meet the requirement? Option A. Add the disaster recovery public egress address to the trusted named location that the policy excludes. Option B. Configure a sign-in frequency session control of every time for Billing Daemon. Option C. Replace block access with a grant control that requires a phishing-resistant authentication strength. Option D. After confirming the report-only results, change the workload identity policy state to on. Lock in your answer. The correct answers are A. Add the disaster recovery public egress address to the trusted named location that the policy excludes. And D. After confirming the report-only results, change the workload identity policy state to on. The current include any/exclude allowed locations design blocks service principal token requests from everywhere except the excluded named location. Adding the disaster recovery address to that allowed location repairs the observed false block without opening other networks. Report only evaluates but does not enforce, so the validated policy must then be turned on. The cited workload identity procedure documents block access as the only grant option for this policy. Exam clue. For a location-based workload policy, read the logic as a set operation. Include every location, exclude the approved egress set, then block what remains. Report-only evidence must still be followed by an enforcement state change. Question 4 of 45. Select one answer. Fabricam directly assigns employees and B2B guests to the Expense SaaS enterprise application. A recurring access review was mistakenly created for the Expense Approvers security group, but that group is not assigned to the application. The review completes with no decisions for the users who actually have Expense SaaS access. A compliance team must periodically review every direct user assignment to the application. What should the application identity engineer do? Option A. Keep the Expense Approvers group review and change its scope from guest users to everyone. Option B. Create an access package request policy that requires the compliance team to approve future Expense SaaS requests. Option C. Create a PIM for groups access review for active and eligible members of Expense Approvers. Option D. Create a resource access review for applications, select Expense SaaS, scope the review to everyone, and select the compliance team as reviewers. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is D. Create a resource access review for applications, select Expense SaaS, scope the review to everyone, and select the compliance team as reviewers. Access reviews are bound to the selected resource. The existing review examines a group that is not the source of Expense SaaS access, so changing group review settings cannot reach the direct application assignees. Creating a review for the application's resource type, selecting Expense SaaS, scoping everyone, and naming the compliance reviewers places every associated user object in the intended application access certification. Exam clue. When a review returns the wrong population, verify the reviewed resource before changing recurrence or outcomes. Group membership reviews and enterprise application assignment reviews certify different access relationships. Question 5 of 45. Select one answer. Contoso completes migration from the legacy MFA and SSPR method policies. The migration state is migration complete. Text message remains enabled in the legacy MFA service settings, but SMS is disabled for the application support group in the authentication methods policy. Members already have valid mobile numbers registered. An existing conditional access policy requires MFA, but SMS is no longer offered to these members. Contoso must restore SMS only for application support while keeping the migration complete. What should an authentication policy administrator do? Option A. Create a conditional access authentication strength that permits SMS and assign it to application support. Option B. Change the migration state from migration complete to migration in progress. Option C. Enable SMS in the authentication methods policy and include the application support group. Option D. Clear and then reselect text message in the legacy MFA service settings. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is C. Enable SMS in the authentication methods policy and include the application support group. Migration complete means only the authentication methods policy controls methods used for authentication and SSPR. Legacy MFA and SSPR method settings are ignored. Enabling SMS in that policy for application support restores the method at the correct tenant control plane while retaining centralized group-scoped management and leaving migration complete. Exam clue. When authentication method migration is complete, diagnose method availability in the authentication methods policy. Do not remediate an ignored legacy setting or substitute a conditional access grant for method enablement. Question 6 of 45. Match each incident to one log. Each log is used once. During an application modernization change window, Contoso records 3 independent incidents. The required activity log permissions and retention are already available. Match each investigation requirement to the Microsoft Entra Admin Center log that provides the decisive evidence. Requirements. Requirement 1. A daemon that uses a service principal fails an app-only token request. Determine the client application, target resource, status, and authentication error for the request. Requirement 2. An HR-driven SaaS provisioning event skipped a user. Inspect the source and target systems, processing steps, status, and error reason. Requirement 3. An application redirect URI changed unexpectedly. Identify the actor and target application and compare the old and new property values. Target bank. Choice A, Microsoft Entra provisioning logs. Choice B, Microsoft Entra audit logs. Choice C, Microsoft Entra service principal sign-in logs. Lock in your answer. The correct mapping is Requirement 1 maps to C, Microsoft Entra Service Principal Sign-in Logs. Requirement 2 maps to A, Microsoft Entra Provisioning Logs. Requirement 3 maps to B, Microsoft Entra Audit Logs. Microsoft Entra separates authentication, directory change, and provisioning service telemetry. The daemon failure is an app-only authentication event and belongs to Service Principal Sign-in Logs. The redirect URI edit is a change to an application object and belongs to audit logs. The HR to SaaS user event is provisioning execution and belongs to provisioning logs, which expose the source/target path and processing steps. Exam clue. Classify the event before choosing evidence. Token use is sign-in telemetry. Resource configuration change is audit telemetry. And connector synchronization execution is provisioning telemetry. Question 7 of 45. Select 2 answers. Contoso has Microsoft Entra IDP1 and an existing engineering tools admin collection. During an administrator rotation, the application operations group must be able to add, remove, and reorder applications in this collection. The group must not become the collection audience and must not receive access to any application. Currently, group members try to edit the collection in My Apps and cannot. A cloud application administrator must remediate the delegation. Which 2 actions should the administrator take? Option A. Have the delegated owners manage the collection under Enterprise Apps and/or App Launchers in the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. Option B. Add the Application Operations group on the Collections Owners tab. Option C. Have group members open My Apps, select the Engineering Tools tab, and edit the admin collection there. Option D. Add the Application Operations group on the Collections Users and Groups tab. Lock in your answer. The correct answers are B. Add the Application Operations group on the Collections Owners tab, and A. Have the delegated owners manage the collection under Enterprise Apps over App Launchers in the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. Collection ownership is the delegation mechanism that lets a user or group manage an administrator-defined collection without assigning that group as the collection audience. Microsoft also documents that admin collections and delegated owner operations are managed through the Microsoft Entra Admin Center, not My Apps. Together, these actions provide management authority at the correct surface without granting application access or collection visibility. Exam clue. For My Apps collections, keep 3 relationships separate. Owners manage the collection, users and groups receive the collection, and enterprise application assignments determine which apps each user can access. Question 8 of 45. Select one answer. Proseware's billing daemon authenticates with a valid certificate and calls a custom Proseware API without a signed-in user. The client app registration already lists the API's invoiced read-all permission with type set to application. The API permissions page shows status as not granted for Proseware, and a newly acquired app-only access token does not contain the corresponding role's value. A privileged role administrator has approved the requested privilege. Which action should the application identity engineer take? Option A. Create a client secret and use it instead of the valid certificate before requesting another token. Option B. Grant tenant-wide admin consent for the configured application permission, and then have the daemon acquire a new access token. Option C. Replace invoiced read-all with a delegated scope and have an interactive user consent during sign-in. Option D. Enable user assignment required on the enterprise application and assign the billing operators group. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is B. Grant tenant-wide admin consent for the configured application permission, and then have the daemon acquire a new access token. Application permissions authorize app-only workloads, but the client must actually be granted the resource API app role. The explicit not granted status and missing roles value isolate consent as the lifecycle gap. Granting tenant-wide admin consent records the permission grant. Obtaining a new token lets the daemon receive the granted role. The valid certificate proves client identity, but cannot substitute for authorization. Exam clue. Separate 3 layers. A credential authenticates the client, an application permission defines app-only authorization, and admin consent grants that permission. A valid token request cannot carry a role that has only been configured but not granted. Question 9 of 45. Select one answer. Proseware uses Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps and Microsoft Defender for Endpoint Plan 2. All corporate Windows devices are onboarded to Defender for Endpoint and meet the documented real-time, cloud-delivered, and network protection prerequisites. Administrators need continuous, user and device-aware cloud discovery for devices working away from the corporate network, without routing their traffic through the office. No endpoint-derived apps appear in cloud discovery. In Defender for Endpoint Advanced Features, the Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps integration is turned off. What should the application identity engineer do? Option A. Turn on the Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps integration in Defender for Endpoint Advanced Features. Option B. Export endpoint traffic once a week and upload it as a snapshot cloud discovery report. Option C. Deploy a log collector for the Office firewall, and require remote devices to wait until they reconnect to the corporate network. Option D. Create a conditional access app control session policy for every discovered application. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is A. Turn on the Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps integration in Defender for Endpoint Advanced Features. The native integration uses network transaction logs produced by Defender for Endpoint to extend shadow IT discovery beyond the corporate network and add user and device context without extra endpoint traffic routing or mirroring. Because the devices and protection prerequisites are already satisfied and the integration toggle is explicitly off, enabling that advanced feature is the direct remediation. Exam clue. Identify the evidence origin before choosing a control. Endpoint network transactions require the native Defender for Endpoint integration. Firewall logs require a collector. Snapshots are manual. Session policies enforce rather than discover. Question 10 of 45. Arrange all actions from first to last. Prosware requires approval to activate the Cloud Application Administrator role in Microsoft Entra PIM. Layla has an eligible assignment and submitted a valid activation request, but no approver acted for more than 24 hours. The request is no longer pending. Layla still needs temporary access, and Omar is a designated approver who is not the requester. Order the actions that remediate the expired request and complete a new approved activation. Items in the displayed order. Item A. Omar opens PIM approve requests and selects Layla's new pending activation request. Item B. Omar enters a business justification for Layla's selected request and selects Submit. Item C. The system sends the approval notification for Layla's new request. Item D. Layla returns to her eligible role and submits a fresh activation request with the required activation details. Lock in your answer. The correct order is: Step 1. Layla returns to her eligible role and submits a fresh activation request with the required activation details. Step 2. Omar opens PIM approve requests and selects Layla's new pending activation request. Step 3. Omar enters a business justification for Layla's selected request and selects Submit. Step 4. The system sends the approval notification for Layla's new request. PIM approval requests have a fixed 24-hour decision window. Once the original request expires, Layla must submit a new activation request. That creates the pending object Omar can select in Approve Requests. Omar then enters the business justification and selects Submit. The archive states that submission sends the approval notification, which is therefore the final ordered outcome. Exam clue. Track the request object state: expired request, new request created, pending request selected, justification entered and submitted, approval notification sent. An approver cannot revive a request that is no longer pending. Question 11 of 45. Select two answers. AdventureWorks is modernizing an internal deployment platform. Application engineers use an interactive web portal, and a single-tenant service principal named SP-Deploy requests app-only tokens for the deployment API. The tenant has the required conditional access and Workload Identities premium licenses. Engineers must re-authenticate every 8 hours. Token requests by SP-Deploy must be blocked outside the named location corp egress. Emergency access accounts are already excluded from workforce policies. Which two conditional access configurations should the identity engineer implement? Option A. Add SP-Deploy to an engineers group targeted by the 8-hour user session policy. Option B. Target SP-Deploy directly as a workload identity and block access outside corp egress. Option C. Remove the deployment API role from SP-deploy whenever its token request originates outside corp egress. Option D. Target the application engineers and deployment portal with a user policy that sets sign-in frequency to 8 hours. Lock in your answer. The correct answers are D. Target the application engineers and deployment portal with a user policy that sets sign-in frequency to 8 hours. And B. Targets deploy directly as a workload identity and block access outside corp egress. The engineer must close 2 identity planes. Sign-in frequency is a session control for the human engineers and can require periodic reauthentication at 8 hours. The app-only service principal is not governed by that user session policy, even through group membership. A separate workload identity policy must directly include SP-deploy, evaluate location, and block requests outside corp egress. Exam clue. Classify the token subject before choosing a conditional access control. Session controls govern user sessions, while app-only service principals require direct workload identity policy scope and the workload-supported grant controls. Question 12 of 45. Match each workload situation to one configuration. Each configuration is used once. AdventureWorks is replacing stored application credentials with managed identities. Every target resource uses Azure RBAC, and the required application code already requests managed identity tokens. Match each requirement or failure to the configuration that closes the identity boundary. Requirements. Requirement 1. A staging deployment slot must have an identity that only that slot can use, and that Azure deletes automatically when the slot is deleted. Requirement 2. A container app and an Azure function must use the same identity. Security must create and authorize the identity before either compute resource exists, and replacing either compute resource must not delete the identity. Requirement 3. A function with an enabled system-assigned identity successfully obtains a storage token, but blob storage returns 403. The identity has no data plane role on the storage account. Target bank. Choice A. Enable a system-assigned managed identity on the deployment slot and grant that identity the target role. Choice B. Grant the function's existing system-assigned identity the required storage data plane RBAC role. Choice C. Create a user-assigned managed identity, grant it the target role, and attach it to both compute resources. Lock in your answer. The correct mapping is requirement 1 maps to A. Enable a system-assigned managed identity on the deployment slot and grant that identity the target role. Requirement 2 maps to C. Create a user-assigned managed identity, grant it the target role, and attach it to both compute resources. Requirement 3 maps to B. Grant the function's existing system-assigned identity the required storage data plane RBAC role. Managed identity selection and target authorization are separate decisions. Shared, pre-created, independently governed identity requires a user-assigned identity. One resource identity with automatic lifecycle coupling requires system assignment on that resource or slot. A token followed by 403 shows authentication succeeded, but authorization at the target is missing. Exam clue. Use lifecycle and sharing evidence to select the managed identity subtype. Then treat a successful token plus target 403 as an authorization stage failure, rather than an identity creation failure. Question 13 of 45. Match each consent state to one administrative action. Each action is used once. AdventureWorks is reconciling consent for 3 applications. Required administrators have reviewed each requested or existing permission. Match each observed consent state to the action that resolves it without changing the application code or requested permission type. Requirements. Requirement 1. An internal app requests a delegated custom API permission that does not require admin consent. The tenant allows users to consent to selected low-impact permissions, but this permission has no classification. Requirement 2. A compromised app has only user-specific delegated grants. The User Consent tab lists the grants, but the portal does not offer a revoke action. All of the app's existing delegated grants must be removed. Requirement 3. A daemon has Microsoft Graph Group Read All configured as an application permission. Its API permission status is not granted, and a privileged role administrator approved the privilege. Target bank. Choice A. Use Microsoft Entra or Microsoft Graph PowerShell/API to remove the app's OAuth 2 permission grants. Choice B. Have the privileged role administrator grant tenant-wide admin consent for the configured application permission. Choice C. Add the delegated API permission to the low permission classification. Lock in your answer. The correct mapping is Requirement 1 maps to C. Add the delegated API permission to the low permission classification. Requirement 2 maps to A. Use Microsoft Entra or Microsoft Graph PowerShell/API to remove the app's OAuth 2 permission grants. Requirement 3 maps to B. Have the privileged role administrator grant tenant-wide admin consent for the configured application permission. Consent evidence must be mapped to the correct object and lifecycle operation. Classification changes whether an eligible delegated permission fits the bounded user consent policy. Tenant-wide admin consent grants an application permission already configured on a daemon. Existing user-delegated OAuth 2 grants are revoked through PowerShell or Microsoft Graph when the portal user consent surface is read-only for revocation. Exam clue. Differentiate consent policy eligibility, creation of an organization-wide grant, and removal of existing grants. They are separate control planes even when all appear under Enterprise Application Consent Administration. Question 14 of 45. Select 2 answers. AdventureWorks runs a recurring access review for assignments to a custom enterprise application. The latest review instance is completed, and its results page shows several users as denied. Auto-apply results to resource was disabled for this review. The denied users still have direct application assignments, and the application is not assigned through nested groups or an on-premises synchronized group. Which 2 actions should an identity governance administrator take to verify and remediate the lifecycle gap? Option A. Open privileged identity management and approve pending activation requests for the denied users. Option B. Select Apply for that instance, then verify the review reaches Result Applied and the denied assignments are removed. Option C. Open Review History, select the completed instance, and inspect its results for the denied decisions. Option D. Restart the Enterprise Application Provisioning job and monitor provisioning logs for assignment removal. Lock in your answer. The correct answers are B. Select Apply for that instance, then verify the review reaches Result Applied and the denied assignments are removed. And C. Open Review History, select the completed instance, and inspect its results for the denied decisions. Review history and the selected instance results provide the decision evidence for completed recurrence. Because auto-apply was disabled, completed does not mean the decisions change directory access. Applying that exact instance removes denied direct application assignments. Monitoring the transition to result applied and confirming assignment removal closes the review lifecycle. Exam clue. Separate reviewer decisions from enforcement state. A completed review can contain denied decisions while access remains unchanged until results are automatically or manually applied. Question 15 of 45. Select 2 answers. AdventureWorks hosts the production API in resource group rg-app-prod. The AppOps group currently has an active contributor assignment on rg-app-prod, so members can change resources without activation. The subscription-level contributor role settings require approval and a 2-hour activation maximum, but tests at rg-app-prod show no approval prompt and access can remain active for 8 hours. AppOps must retain access only to rg-app-prod, have no standing contributor permissions, and require approval with a 2-hour maximum whenever members activate. Which 2 actions should a resource administrator take? Option A. Configure the contributor role settings on rg-app-prod to require approval and set the activation maximum duration to 2 hours. Option B. Keep the active assignment and add more approvers to the subscription-level contributor role settings. Option C. Remove the active contributor assignment and assign AppOps as eligible for contributor on rg-app-prod. Option D. Replace the assignment with an eligible contributor assignment at the subscription scope so that the existing subscription settings apply. Lock in your answer. The correct answers are A. Configure the contributor role settings on rg-app-prod to require approval and set the activation maximum duration to 2 hours. And C. Remove the active contributor assignment and assign AppOps as eligible for contributor on rg-app-prod. Eligible assignment removes standing contributor access while preserving just-in-time activation at the required resource group scope. Azure PIM role settings are independent per role and per resource. Subscription settings do not flow down to rg-app-prod. Therefore, the contributor activation policy must also be configured on rg-app-prod with approval and a 2-hour maximum. Exam clue. Troubleshoot Azure PIM in 2 dimensions. Assignment type determines standing versus activatable access, while role settings must be configured for the exact role and resource scope because higher scope settings are not inherited. Question 16 of 45. Select one answer. AdventureWorks enables an Authenticator registration campaign for application support engineers. Microsoft Authenticator is enabled for the group in any mode. The engineers can complete MFA, and none has Authenticator push registered. Engineers signing in from the corporate network receive the setup nudge. The same engineers complete MFA from compliant remote devices but never receive the nudge. A conditional access policy targeting the Register Security Information user action grants access only from named corporate locations. What should the identity engineer change to allow the remote engineers to receive the campaign nudge while retaining the campaign and method configuration? Option A. Set days allowed to snooze in the registration campaign to 0. Option B. Change the Authenticator authentication mode for the group from any to push. Option C. Remove and re-add the application support group to the campaign include list. Option D. Update the conditional access policy for Register Security Information to allow the approved compliant remote device condition. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is D. Update the conditional access policy for Register Security Information to allow the approved compliant remote device condition. Microsoft documents that conditional access policies governing security information registration apply before the registration campaign nudge. Because the same targeted MFA-capable users are nudged on the corporate network, campaign targeting and Authenticator eligibility are working. The location-only Register Security Information policy is the remaining gate and must be adjusted for the approved remote device condition. Exam clue. When a registration nudge varies by location or device, while targeting and method eligibility are constant, inspect conditional access for the Register Security Information user action. It is evaluated before the campaign prompt. Question 17 of 45. Select one answer. AdventureWorks and Fabricam use separate commercial Microsoft Entra tenants for a joint API program. AdventureWorks currently has a healthy cross-tenant synchronization configuration that provisions selected AdventureWorks engineers into Fabricam, and Fabricam allows inbound synchronization from AdventureWorks. The program now requires selected Fabricam engineers to be provisioned automatically into AdventureWorks and deprovisioned there when they leave the Fabricam source scope. No manual guest invitations are allowed. What should the identity engineer do? Option A. Enable inbound synchronization from AdventureWorks in Fabricam again and restart the existing AdventureWorks job. Option B. Add the Fabricam engineers to the existing AdventureWorks source configuration and keep Fabricam as its target. Option C. In AdventureWorks, allow inbound synchronization from Fabricam, then create, scope, and start a cross-tenant synchronization configuration in Fabricam that targets AdventureWorks. Option D. In AdventureWorks, trust multi-factor authentication claims from Fabricam and leave cross-tenant provisioning unchanged. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is C. In AdventureWorks, allow inbound synchronization from Fabricam, then create, scope, and start a cross-tenant synchronization configuration in Fabricam that targets AdventureWorks. Cross-tenant synchronization is directional. A configuration in the source tenant provisions identities into a target tenant that permits inbound synchronization from that source. The existing AdventureWorks source job covers only AdventureWorks to Fabricam lifecycle. The reverse lifecycle requires AdventureWorks to permit Fabricam inbound synchronization and Fabricam to operate a separately scoped source configuration targeting AdventureWorks. Exam clue. For reciprocal cross-tenant lifecycle, draw two arrows. Each arrow needs target-side inbound permission and its own source-side scoped provisioning configuration. Authentication trust and guest invitation do not reverse a provisioning job. Question 18 of 45. Select one answer. AdventureWorks accidentally deleted an internal user account used by an application release engineer 4 days ago. The account is listed under Deleted Users. The engineer must regain the same account properties and the license that was assigned when the account was deleted. What should the application identity engineer do? Option A. Permanently delete the suspended user and then recreate the account with the original display name. Option B. Restore the user from Deleted Users. Option C. Wait until the 30-day retention period ends and then reactivate the account. Option D. Create a new user with a different user principal name and assign a new license. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is B. Restore the user from deleted users. A deleted Microsoft Entra user remains suspended and restorable for 30 days. Restoring the listed user recovers the preserved organization information and also restores licenses assigned at deletion. Because only 4 days have elapsed, no replacement account or permanent delete action is required. Exam clue. Treat deleted users as a lifecycle state, not a new user request. Within 30 days, restore the preserved object. After permanent deletion, recreation produces a different object. Question 19 of 45. Select one answer. AdventureWorks keeps. Users can register applications set to No. A cloud application administrator has already created a registration for a test client. One developer must manage this registration's redirect URIs and credentials, but must not create other registrations or administer applications tenant-wide. What should the administrator do? Option A. Add the developer as an owner of the existing app registration. Option B. Assign Azure contributor on the subscription containing the application. Option C. Assign the application developer role to the developer. Option D. Set users can register applications to Yes. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is A. Add the developer as an owner of the existing app registration. Microsoft's delegation guidance documents an administrator-created registration followed by assignment of owners as an alternative to granting registration capability. Ownership scopes the developer to the existing app object while preserving. Users can register applications. No. Exam clue. If the app already exists and the user needs to manage only that object, Prefer ownership over a tenant-wide creation role. Question 20 of 45. Select one answer. AdventureWorks uses Microsoft Entra Cloud Sync for application operator accounts. Synchronization enters quarantine with error code Azure Directory Service authorization failed. All provisioning agents are active and healthy. A Microsoft Graph query for a service principal named Microsoft Entra ID synchronization service returns no result. Which action should the application identity engineer take to remediate the underlying cause? Option A. Uninstall and reinstall every healthy provisioning agent. Option B. Clear the quarantine status without changing the tenant organization. Option C. Select Restart Sync on the Cloud Sync configuration without changing the tenant organization. Option D. Patch the tenant organization with on-premises sync enabled set to true, and then verify that the synchronization service principal is recreated. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is D. Patch the tenant organization with on-premises sync enabled set to true, and then verify that the synchronization service principal is recreated. For Azure Directory Service authorization failed, Microsoft identifies a missing Microsoft Entra ID synchronization service principal as the most likely cause. When the query returns no object, setting on-premises sync enabled to true on the organization triggers creation of a new service principal, even if synchronization is already enabled. The other actions do not perform that documented organization patch. Exam clue. Use the evidence layer. Healthy agents rule out the connector host, while an authorization failure plus a missing synchronization service principal points to tenant-side service principal restoration before job state retries. Question 21 of 45. Match each observation to one action. Each action is used once. Fabricam uses Microsoft Entra PIM for an application administrator role that requires approval. During an application release incident, the identity engineer records 4 independent observations. Match each observation to the next action that addresses the current lifecycle state without creating a permanent role assignment. Requirements. Requirement 1. An eligible engineer completed the activation controls and entered a reason, but has not selected Activate. No request appears for approvers. Requirement 2. PIM shows the temporary role assignment as active, but the enterprise application still denies access immediately after activation and had cached the earlier authorization result. Requirement 3. No delegated approver acted within 24 hours. The old request can no longer be approved, and the engineer still needs the role. Requirement 4. The activation request is pending approval. The requester is also listed as an approver and tries to approve the same request. Target bank. Choice A. Have the eligible engineer submit a new activation request. Choice B. Verify the PIM assignment remains active and address the application's cached authorization state before changing the assignment. Choice C. Have a different delegated approver open approve requests, justify the decision, and submit approval. Choice D. Have the eligible engineer select Activate to submit the request. Lock in your answer. The correct mapping is Requirement 1 maps to D. Have the eligible engineer select Activate to submit the request. Requirement 2 maps to B. Verify the PIM assignment remains active and address the application's cached authorization state before changing the assignment. Requirement 3 maps to A. Have the eligible engineer submit a new activation request. Requirement 4 maps to C. Have a different delegated approver open approve requests, justify the decision, and submit approval. PIM request date determines the next actor and action. The requester must select Activate to create a request. A separate delegated approver acts on a pending request. Expiration after 24 hours requires a new request. And an active PIM assignment paired with an application that cached denial is an application authorization cache boundary, rather than a reason to create permanent access. Exam clue. Troubleshoot privileged access by locating the state transition that already occurred. Request not submitted, pending approval, expired approval, active assignment, and downstream authorization are separate evidence surfaces. Question 22 of 45. Select two answers. Fabricam has two cloud-only emergency access accounts in the .onmicrosoft.com domain. Both have permanent active global administrator assignments, independent FIDO2 security keys stored separately, and exclusions from conditional access policies that can block sign-in. The accounts are not used for routine administration. Which two ongoing controls should the identity engineer implement to detect misuse and verify operational readiness? Option A. Convert both global administrator assignments to PIM-eligible assignments and require approval for activation. Option B. Disable both accounts after each validation drill and enable them only when an emergency is declared. Option C. Run an account validation drill at least every 90 days that tests sign-in and an administrative task. Option D. Monitor sign-in and audit log activity for both accounts and alert administrators whenever activity occurs. Lock in your answer. The correct answers are D. Monitor sign-in and audit log activity for both accounts and alert administrators whenever activity occurs. And C. Run an account validation drill at least every 90 days that tests sign-in and an administrative task. Emergency access is both a readiness and a detection problem. Microsoft recommends alerting on all sign-in and audit activity, so unnecessary or unauthorized use is visible, and validating account functionality at least every 90 days, including sign-in and an administrative task. The existing permanent active role, independent authentication, secure storage, and conditional access exclusions should remain. Exam clue. Once break glass independence is established, preserve readiness with recurring functional tests, and preserve accountability with alerts on every sign-in and audit change. Do not add controls that can block emergency activation. Question 23 of 45. Match each post-deployment output gate to one ARM identity block. A block can be used at most once. Two blocks will remain unused. Fabricam deploys 3 Azure App Service apps with ARM templates. 2 existing user-assigned identities are available. /UAMI/checkout is required by the release specification, while /UAMI/archive is reserved for another workload. For each app, the pipeline evaluates the identity object returned after deployment. Match each output gate to the ARM identity block that satisfies it. Requirements. Requirement 1. Gate 1 passes only when the returned identity object contains a top-level principal ID and its user-assigned identities map contains the /UAMI/checkout key. Requirement 2. Gate 2 passes only when the returned identity object contains a top-level principal ID and has no user-assigned identities property. Requirement 3. Gate 3 passes only when the returned identity object has no top-level principal ID and its user-assigned identities map contains the /UAMI/checkout key. Target bank. Choice A. Identity. Type user-assigned. User-assigned identities. UAMI/archive. Choice B. Identity. Type system-assigned. Choice C. Identity. Type system-assigned user-assigned, user-assigned identities, UAMI/archive, choice D. Identity. Type system-assigned user-assigned, user-assigned identities, UAMI/checkout, choice E. Identity. Type user-assigned identities, UAMI/checkout. Lock in your answer. The correct mapping is requirement 1 maps to D, identity, type, system-assigned, user-assigned identities /UAMI/checkout. Requirement 2 maps to B, identity, type, system-assigned. Requirement 3 maps to E, identity, type, user-assigned identities /UAMI/checkout. For app service ARM declarations, system-assigned requests a resource-owned identity and therefore a returned principal ID. User-assigned binds identities named by resource ID keys in user-assigned identities. The combined declaration produces both effects. The checkout and archive blocks have the same type shapes, so the exact map key is discriminating evidence. Exam clue: do not classify a row by a single word. Reconcile top-level principal ID presence and exact map key membership against the declaration together. Question 24 of 45. Select one answer. Fabricam runs an on-premises production daemon that uses the OAuth 2.0 client credentials flow to call a custom API. Token request began failing immediately after the app registration's only client secret expired. The daemon already supports certificate-based confidential client authentication, and operations supplied a CA-issued certificate. Fabricam must restore authentication without creating another password-style secret. Which action should the application identity engineer take? Option A. Grant tenant-wide admin consent for the custom API permissions again. Option B. Add the daemon's callback URL as a web redirect URI on the app registration. Option C. Upload the certificate's public file under the app registration's Certificates and Secrets page, and configure the daemon to authenticate with the corresponding private key and thumbprint. Option D. Configure the certificate as the SAML signing certificate on the enterprise application. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is C. Upload the certificate's public file under the app registration's Certificates and Secrets page, and configure the daemon to authenticate with the corresponding private key and thumbprint. A production confidential client can authenticate by presenting a certificate-based client assertion. Microsoft recommends a certificate rather than a client secret for production and documents. Uploading the public certificate to the app registration under Certificates and Secrets. The daemon retains the corresponding private key and uses the recorded thumbprint. None of the other actions performs this documented certificate credential upload. Exam clue. For an expired production confidential client credential, follow the documented app registration path. Upload the certificate under Certificates and Secrets, and record its thumbprint for client code. Question 25 of 45. Select one answer. AdventureWorks deploys the Global Secure Access Client to a Microsoft Entra joined Windows 11 laptop. The assigned private access profile and private application segment are healthy. The client shows connected, and its Microsoft 365 channel works. After the user selects Disable Private Access while on the corporate network, the laptop leaves the office and can no longer reach the private build API. The client status now shows Global Secure Access. Private access is disabled. What should the application identity engineer do first? Option A. Disable and re-enable the Microsoft Traffic Forwarding profile. Option B. Re-enable private access on the client, or set Is Private Access Disabled by User to 0 for the user. Option C. Publish the Build API through Microsoft Entra Application Proxy and remove the Private Access Application segment. Option D. Uninstall and reinstall the Global Secure Access Client. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is B. re-enable private access on the client, or set is private access disabled by user to 0 for the user. The status message identifies the local lifecycle state. Private access was disabled on this device. Microsoft documents that is private access disabled by user equals 1 bypasses global secure access for private applications, while 0 re-enables private access, so private application traffic goes through global secure access. Because the overall client and Microsoft 365 channel remain connected, reinstalling the client or changing the Microsoft profile does not target the observed failure. Exam clue. Treat Global Secure Access client status as channel-specific evidence. A connected client can still have private access disabled locally. Repair the named channel state before redesigning publishing or reinstalling the endpoint client. Question 26 of 45. Select one answer. AdventureWorks exposes a custom API and previously assigned its legacy export app role to a daemon application. The API team sets the app role to disabled because the daemon must no longer receive that authorization. The daemon then obtains a new access token, but the token still contains legacy exit in the roles claim. What should the application identity engineer do? Option A. Remove the legacy export app role assignment from the daemon application's service principal. Option B. Delete the daemon application's client secret, but keep the app role assignment. Option C. Create a delegated OAuth scope named Legacy Export and grant it to the daemon instead. Option D. Leave the role disabled and wait for Microsoft Entra ID to remove the existing assignment automatically. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is A. Remove the legacy exporter app role assignment from the daemon application's service principal. Microsoft documents that a disabled app role becomes inactive and cannot receive new assignments, but current assignments remain, and the role continues to pass in tokens. The engineer must remove the app role assignment from the daemon service principal to remove that authorization from subsequently issued tokens. Credential deletion and delegated scopes operate on different authentication or permission boundaries. Exam clue. Separate an app role definition's enabled state from existing assignment state. Disabling stops availability for new assignments. Revoking effective authorization requires removing the existing assignment. Question 27 of 45. Select two answers. AdventureWorks is piloting a conditional access policy for engineers who access the production API portal. The new policy is in report-only mode and requires a compliant device. An existing enforced policy requires multi-factor authentication. For a pilot sign-in from an unmanaged laptop, the sign-in succeeds, the enforced MFA policy shows success, and the new policy shows report-only failure. The final design must block unmanaged devices without interrupting the pilot while the device is remediated. Which two actions should the application identity engineer take? Option A. After the report-only results meet the requirement, change the new policy state from report-only to on. Option B. Bring the laptop into compliance and use a new sign-in event to confirm that the new policy changes from report-only failure to report-only success. Option C. Exclude the pilot engineer from the new policy because report-only failure means that the policy conditions did not match. Option D. Leave the new policy in report-only mode and rely on success from the enforced MFA policy to block non-compliant devices. Lock in your answer. The correct answers are B. Bring the laptop into compliance and use a new sign-in event to confirm that the new policy changes from report-only, failure to report-only, success, and A. After the report-only results meet the requirement, change the new policy state from report-only to on. Report-only. Failure means all configured policy conditions matched, but at least one required non-interactive grant or session control was not satisfied. Here, the unmanaged device fails the compliant device grant, while the separate enforced MFA policy succeeds and allows the sign-in because the report-only policy is not enforced. The engineer should remediate the device and verify a successful report-only result. Then move the validated policy to on to enforce the device requirement. Exam clue. Read conditional access results per policy. Success for one enforced policy does not satisfy another policy's controls, and report-only failure predicts a block without imposing it until the policy is turned on. Question 28 of 45. Select two answers. An application release engineer loses a phone that contains the engineer's device-bound Microsoft Authenticator passkey. A developer CLI on the same phone previously obtained delegated OAuth 2.0 access and refresh tokens for a deployment API. The user account must remain enabled, but the lost passkey must no longer authenticate the engineer, and the refresh token must not obtain new access tokens. Which two actions should the application identity engineer take? Option A, reset only the engineer's password. Option B, delete the lost device-bound passkey from the engineer's authentication methods. Option C, revoke the engineer's Microsoft Entra sign-in sessions. Option D, delete the deployment API app registration's client secret. Lock in your answer. The correct answers are B, delete the lost device-bound passkey from the engineer's authentication methods, and C, revoke the engineer's Microsoft Entra sign-in sessions. The two compromised artifacts live at different layers. Delete the device-bound passkey from the user's authentication methods so that credential can no longer be used for a new sign-in. Then revoke the user's sessions to invalidate Microsoft Entra refresh tokens and browser session cookies, preventing the lost refresh token from silently obtaining replacement access tokens. Already issued access tokens can remain usable until expiry, unless another supported invalidation mechanism applies. So the question asks specifically about new authentication and token refresh. Exam clue. Contain each artifact with the documented user-level action. Delete the compromised device-bound passkey from authentication methods, and revoke the user's sessions to invalidate Microsoft Entra refresh tokens. Question 29 of 45. Select one answer. AdventureWorks protects an internal deployment portal with a conditional access policy that blocks access when an included device filter matches device.isCompliant EQ false. A release engineer signs in from an unregistered personal device and reaches the portal. The sign-in log shows a blank device ID, null device properties, and the device filter condition as not matched. What should the application identity engineer change so that this policy also targets unregistered devices? Option A, move filter for devices from conditions to grant controls and keep the same expression. Option B, keep include filtered devices and the rule device.isCompliant EQ false. Option C, change the rule to device.operating-system EQ Windows. 150. D. Keep include filtered devices, but change the rule to device.isCompliant N true. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is D. Keep include filtered devices, but change the rule to device.isCompliant-NE true. Microsoft Entra evaluates filter rules from device object properties. An unregistered device has no directory object, so all of those properties are null. Positive operators such as -EQ false apply only when a device exists and the attribute matches. A negative operator is the documented way to target unregistered devices. Device.isCompliant-NE true includes devices that are not known to be compliant, including the observed null property device. Exam clue. A blank device ID changes the logic. Null is not the Boolean value false. Use a negative operator when the policy must include devices whose directory properties do not exist. Question 30 of 45. Select one answer. AdventureWorks already uses SAML/WS-Fed Identity Provider Federation, so partner engineers can authenticate to an internal deployment portal with accounts managed by the partner. Sign-ins begin failing immediately after the partner rotates its SAML signing certificate before the old certificate expires. The federation configuration has no metadata URL, and its issuer and passive authentication endpoint are unchanged. What should the application identity engineer do? Option A. Enable trust for the partner's MFA claim in cross-tenant access settings. Option B. Upload the certificate under the Deployment Portal Enterprise Applications SAML Single Sign-On settings. Option C. Edit the partner under all identity providers and enter the new signing certificate ID. Option D. Delete and resend all partner B2B invitations. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is C. Edit the partner under all identity providers and enter the new signing certificate ID. A metadata URL lets Microsoft Entra automatically renew a signing certificate when it expires. If the partner rotates their certificate early or no metadata URL is supplied, Microsoft Entra cannot renew it automatically. The engineer must edit the configured SAML/WS-Fed identity provider and enter the new signing certificate ID. None of the other actions performs this documented update. Exam clue. For an early partner IDP signing certificate rotation without a metadata URL, follow the documented repair. Edit the partner under External Identities, All Identity Providers, and enter the new signing certificate ID. Question 31 of 45. Arrange all actions from first to last. Fabricam must archive Microsoft Entra Audit and Service Principal Sign-In logs beyond the built-in retention period for an application modernization investigation. No approved storage account exists yet. The logs do not need KQL analysis or real-time streaming, and the engineer must not use the deprecated diagnostic settings retention fields. Order the actions required to configure the archive destination. Items in the displayed order. Item A. Save the diagnostic setting. Manage any age-based deletion later with an Azure Storage Lifecycle policy. Item B. Create the approved general-purpose Azure Storage account and ensure the configuring identity has list keys permission. Item C. Select Archive to a storage account, then choose the approved subscription and storage account. Item D. In Microsoft Entra Diagnostic Settings, add a diagnostic setting, name it, and select the Audit and Service Principal Sign-In log categories. Lock in your answer. The correct order is Step 1. Create the approved general-purpose Azure Storage account and ensure the configuring identity has list keys permission. Step 2. In Microsoft Entra Diagnostic Settings, add a diagnostic setting, name it, and select the Audit and Service Principal Sign-In log categories. Step 3. Select Archive to a storage account, then choose the approved subscription and storage account. Step 4. Save the diagnostic setting. Manage any age-based deletion later with an Azure Storage Lifecycle policy. The storage account and list keys access are prerequisites. The engineer then creates the Entra diagnostic setting, chooses the required categories, selects Archive to a storage account with the correct subscription and account, and saves. Any time-based deletion is handled separately through Azure Storage Lifecycle Management, because the diagnostic settings storage retention feature is deprecated. Exam clue. For order destination questions, follow object dependencies. Create the destination, define the telemetry and categories, bind the destination, then save. Treat storage lifecycle management as separate from Entra routing. Question 32 of 45. Select one answer. Fabricam used a connected organization for an external application testing vendor. The contract has ended. All access package assignments have expired. No access package policy references the vendor, and the vendor guest accounts are being handled by a separate offboarding process. An identity governance administrator must remove the obsolete partner relationship from entitlement management. What should the administrator do? Option A. Edit the connected organization and change its state from configured to proposed. Option B. Open the vendor under entitlement management, connected organizations, and delete the connected organization. Option C. Remove all external sponsors from the connected organization and leave it configured. Option D. Delete every vendor guest account and leave the connected organization configured. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is B. Open the vendor under entitlement management, connected organizations, and delete the connected organization. Microsoft Documents, deletion of a connected organization when the relationship with the external directory or domain no longer exists. The scenario closes assignment, policy reference, and guest offboarding concerns. So deleting the connected organization is the action that removes the obsolete entitlement management relationship. State, sponsors, and guest objects are separate management boundaries. Exam clue. Identify which object owns the stale state. Remove an ended partner relationship at connected organizations. Do not substitute sponsor maintenance or guest account lifecycle actions. Question 33 of 45. Select one answer. A Tailspin engineer received a replacement account in the Tailspin home tenant after the original account was deleted and recreated. In Fabricam's resource tenant, the existing guest object still has the required groups and enterprise application assignments. Sign in with the replacement account fails. Fabricam must let the engineer redeem with the new home account while preserving the guest object's current access. What should a user administrator do? Option A. Update the guest's email if necessary. Reset the guest user's redemption status, and send a new invitation for the existing guest object. Option B. Change the existing guest object's user type from guest to member. Option C. Enable inbound cross-tenant synchronization from Tailspin for the existing guest object. Option D. Delete the existing guest object and invite the replacement account as a new guest. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is A. Update the guest's email if necessary. Reset the guest user's redemption status, and send a new invitation for the existing guest object. A user administrator can use the documented admin center procedure. Resetting redemption is specifically documented for a deleted and recreated home account or changed sign-in identity. It sends the user through redemption again while retaining the resource tenant guest object ID, group memberships, and app assignments. Deletion would discard that continuity, and neither user type nor a provision and configuration repairs this redemption binding. Exam clue. When the external person is the same and resource tenant access must stay attached to the same object, reset redemption. Recreate the guest only when object continuity is not required. Question 34 of 45. Select one answer. Fabricam enabled self-service password reset only for the SSPR App Engineers group. A newly hired application engineer has a Microsoft Entra ID P1 license and registered an allowed authentication method, but the account is not a member of SSPR App Engineers. At the password reset portal, the engineer is told that the account is not enabled for password reset. Other users in the group can reset successfully. What should the administrator do? Option A. Assign the engineer an application role on the password reset service principal. Option B. Create a conditional access policy that requires multi-factor authentication for the engineer. Option C. Change self-service password reset enabled from selected to all. Option D. Add the engineer's account to SSPR App Engineers and keep the SSPR scope set to Selected. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is D. Add the engineer's account to SSPR App Engineers and keep the SSPR scope set to Selected. With SSPR set to Selected, only members of the chosen group are enabled. The engineer already satisfies the licensing and registration conditions, and successful resets by existing group members isolate the failure to scope membership. Adding the account to SSPR App Engineers restores the intended narrow deployment without broadening SSPR tenant-wide. Exam clue. For a selected SSPR rollout, compare a failing user with a successful user and check membership in the one enabled group before changing methods, conditional access, or application authorization. Question 35 of 45. Select one answer. AdventureWorks uses an access package to grant developers time-limited access to a production API. The package policy requires approval and specifies manager as the first approver. A newly hired application engineer has no manager attribute in Microsoft Entra ID, and the security operations group does not receive the request. Before the engineer submits a new request, which policy change is designed to handle this condition? Option A. Add the security operations group only as an alternate approver with forwarding scheduled for day 5. Option B. Disable approval and have an administrator directly assign the access package to every developer. Option C. Add the security operations group as a fallback approver for the manager approver. Option D. Assign the engineer directly to the API enterprise application and leave the access package policy unchanged. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is C. Add the security operations group as a fallback approver for the manager approver. Microsoft documents that manager-based approval resolves the approver from the requester's manager attribute. When entitlement management cannot find that manager, a configured fallback approver receives the request. Adding the security operations group as the manager fallback repairs the stated routing condition while preserving the access package's approval and lifecycle controls. Exam clue. Distinguish fallback from alternate approval. Fallback handles an approver identity that cannot be resolved, such as a missing manager attribute. Alternate approval forwards an existing pending request on a configured schedule. Question 36 of 45. Select one answer. AdventureWorks creates the block legacy authentication conditional access template in report-only mode. The team expects it to stop a single-tenant daemon service principal from requesting tokens outside approved network locations. Service principal sign-in logs show that the daemon continues to obtain tokens and the template policy is not applied. What should the application identity engineer configure instead? Option A. Target the daemon's managed identity in the template created policy and require multi-factor authentication. Option B. Create a conditional access policy for workload identities. Directly include the daemon service principal, configure the location condition, and select block access. Option C. Turn the template created user policy on and add the approved locations as exclusions. Option D. Add the service principal to a group that is included in the template created user policy. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is B. Create a conditional access policy for workload identities, directly include the daemon service principal, configure the location condition, and select block access. Conditional access for workload identities is the policy surface for organization-owned single-tenant service principals. Microsoft specifies that a service principal must be assigned directly to the policy as a workload identity. Group-based user policy assignment is not enforced for it. For a location-based workload policy, block access is the available grant action. Therefore, activating or reshaping the user template cannot enforce the daemon requirement. Exam clue. When conditional access evidence names a service principal sign-in, first verify the identity plane. User template targeting, group membership, and workload identity targeting are not interchangeable. Question 37 of 45. Select one answer. AdventureWorks disables a departing application engineer's Microsoft Entra account and selects Revoke Sessions. The engineer can no longer start a new Microsoft Entra sign-in. However, an already open custom-build portal remains usable because the portal issued its own session cookie and does not redirect the browser to Microsoft Entra ID until that cookie expires. What should the application identity engineer do to end this remaining access? Option A. Revoke the portal's application-issued session through the portal's authorization controls, or deprovision the user from the portal. Option B. Delete the portal app registration's client secret. Option C. Disable the engineer's registered device object and leave the portal session unchanged. Option D. Select Revoke Sessions again in Microsoft Entra ID and assume it directly deletes the portal cookie. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is A. Revoke the portal's application-issued session through the portal's authorization controls, or deprovision the user from the portal. Browser applications can maintain two session layers, one from Microsoft Entra ID and another issued by the application. After the application issues its own session token, its authorization policy controls that session, and Microsoft Entra ID cannot directly revoke it. The remaining access must therefore be ended through the portal's own session revocation controls, or by deprovisioning the user so the application revokes its session. Exam clue. Trace who issued the still valid session material. Revoke Sessions acts on Microsoft Entra session and refresh token state. An application-owned cookie requires application-side revocation or deprovisioning. Question 38 of 45. Select one answer. AdventureWorks bulk invites external developers who will test an internal deployment application. Most rows complete successfully, but one partner recipient is not created. The bulk results file reports, "This invitation is blocked by cross-tenant access settings in your organization. Your administrator must configure cross-tenant access settings to allow this invitation." What should the application identity engineer do? Option A. Upload the entire bulk invite CSV again without changing tenant settings. Option B. Use bulk create to provision the recipient as a member account with an AdventureWorks password. Option C. Enable email one-time passcode authentication and leave the cross-tenant settings unchanged. Option D. Update the partner-specific cross-tenant access settings to allow B2B collaboration, and then retry the failed invitation. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is D. Update the partner-specific cross-tenant access settings to allow B2B collaboration, and then retry the failed invitation. The result identifies the failing layer directly. Cross-tenant access settings are blocking B2B collaboration with that partner. The engineer must change the applicable partner-specific settings so the invitation is allowed, then retry the failed recipient. Retrying unchanged, creating an internal member account, or changing an authentication method does not remove the collaboration policy block. Exam clue. Read bulk invitation errors by control layer. Fix an invitation policy block before retrying. Authentication methods and internal account creation solve different problems. Question 39 of 45. Match each required 3-record result package to one complete KQL plan. Use each plan at most once. 3 plans are not used. AdventureWorks exports Microsoft Entra Service Principal sign-ins to Log Analytics. 3 labeled record sets contain Service Principal ID / resource directory / result type rows. R1 equals alpha / API-1 / 0500074, alpha / API2 / 0, beta / API1 / 50074 50074, gamma API1 / 00, gamma API2 / 50074 50074 50074. R2 has the same value pattern for delta / vault graph, epsilon / vault, zeta / graph vault. R3 has the same value pattern for eta / payroll storage, theta payroll, iota / storage payroll. Each plan supplies 1 continuation per record after AADServicePrincipalSignInLogs. Interpret 0 as success and non-zero as failure. Aggregate each complete labeled record set before where and match the full 3-record result package, not an individual row, to a plan. Requirements. Requirement 1. Required retained group package. Record 1. Beta / API1, n equals 2, z equals 0, nz equals 2. Gamma / API2, n equals 3, z equals 0, nz equals 3. Record 2. Delta vault, n equals 2, z equals 1, nz equals 1. Record 3. Eta, n equals 3, z equals 2, nz equals 1. Iota, n equals 5, z equals 2, nz equals 3. Theta, n equals 2, z equals 0, nz equals 2. Requirement 2. Required retained group package. Record 1. Alpha, n equals 3, z equals 2, nz equals 1. Beta, n equals 2, z equals 0, nz equals 2. Gamma, n equals 5, z equals 2, nz equals 3. Record 2. Epsilon vault, n equals 2, z equals 0, nz equals 2. Zeta vault, n equals 3, z equals 0, nz equals 3. Record 3. Eta payroll, n equals 2, z equals 1, nz equals 1. Requirement 3. Required retained group package. Record 1. Alpha, n equals 3, z equals 2, nz equals 1. Beta, n equals 2, z equals 0, nz equals 2. Gamma, n equals 5, z equals 2, nz equals 3. Record 2. Delta vault, n equals 2, z equals 1, nz equals 1. Record 3. Iota payroll, n equals 3, z equals 0, nz equals 3. Theta payroll, n equals 2, z equals 0, nz equals 2. Requirement 4. Required retained group package. Record 1. Alpha / API1, n equals 2, z equals 1, nz equals 1. Record 2. Delta, n equals 3, z equals 2, nz equals 1. Epsilon, n equals 2, z equals 0, nz equals 2. Zeta, n equals 5, z equals 2, nz equals 3. Record 3. Iota payroll, n equals 3, z equals 0, nz equals 3. Theta payroll, n equals 2, z equals 0, nz equals 2. Requirement 5. Required retained group package. Record 1. Beta / API1, n equals 2, z equals 0, nz equals 2. Gamma / API2, n equals 3, z equals 0, and z equals 3. Record 2. Delta, n equals 3, z equals 2, and z equals 1. Epsilon, n equals 2, z equals 0, and z equals 2. Zeta, n equals 5, z equals 2, and z equals 3. Record 3. Eta, payroll, n equals 2, z equals 1, and z equals 1. Target bank, choice A. Summarize. N col C, z underscore count, z if kis ease 0, and z dot count if riscal ull aont not at 0 by service principal ID resource declared, where z of raketlin 0 and nz of ratetlin 0. Summarize. N cols count, z cold count if riscal ulev type equals 0, and z dot count if results type not of year 0 by service principal ID, where nz of ratetlin 0. Summarize. N cold count, z cold count if riscal sponse equals 0, and z nil if resetting type not if year 0 by service principal ID resource plaza, where nz equals n. Choice B. Summarize. N cold count, z cold count if riscal asset type equals 0, and z cold me SDF redistribution type not of equals 0 by service principal ID, where nz of ratetlin 0. Summarize. N cold count, z cold CIF riscal mentu type equals 0, and z cold count if riscal oration type equals 0 by service principal ID, where nz of ratetlin 0. Summarize. N cold 9 cold z cold riscal prejudice dot result type equals 0, and z cold count if riscal isn not of 0 by service principal ID, where nz of ratetlin 0. Choice C. Summarize. N cold count, z cold count if riscal equals 0, and z cold riscal isn not of year 0 by service principal ID resource orientation, where nz equals n. Summarize. N cold count, z cold count if riscal isn not of year 0, and z cold count if riscal isn not of year 0 resource authorization, where nz equals n. Summarize. N cold count, z cold riscal isn not of year 0, and z cold count if riscal isn not of year 0 by service principal ID resource to statement, where nz equals n. Choice D. Summarize. N cold count, z cold count if riscal ulev type equals 0, and z cold z equals 0 riscal isn not of year 0 by service principal ID, where nz of ratetlin 0. Summarize. N cold count, z cold count if riscal isn not of year 0, and z cold CIF riscal isn not of year 0 by service principal ID resource to statement, where z of ratetlin 0 and nz of ratetlin 0. Summarize. N cold count, z cold count if equals 0, and z cold CIF riscal ulev type equals 0 by service principal ID resource to statement, where nz equals n. Choice E. Summarize. N cold count, z cold count if riscal isn not of year 0, and z cold count if riscal isn not of year 0 by service principal ID resource to statement, where z of ratetlin 0 and nz of ratetlin 0. Summarize. N cold z cold count if riscal isn not of year 0, and z cold count if riscal isn not of year 0 by service principal ID resource to statement, where Z overrated len0 and NZ overrated len0. Summarize. N cold count, Z cold count IF equals a 0, and Z cold count IF riscal is in not of your 0, by service principal ID resource to statement, where Z overrated len0 and NZ overrated len0. Choice F. Summarize. N cold count, Z cold count IF equals a 0, and service principal ID, where NZ overrated len0. Summarize. N cold count, Z cold count IF equals a 0, and Z cold CIF riscal is in not of your 0, and Z cold N. Summarize. N cold count, Z cold count IF equals a 0, and Z cold Z overrated len0, by service principal ID resource to statement, where Z overrated len0 and NZ overrated len0. Choice G. Summarize. N cold count, Z cold count IF equals a 0, and Z cold CIF riscal is in not of your 0, by service principal ID resource to statement, where NZ equals is N. Summarize. N cold count, Z cold count IF equals a 0, and Z cold Z overrated len0, by service principal ID, where NZ overrated len0. Summarize. N cold count, Z cold count IF equals a 0, and Z cold CIF equals a 0, by service principal ID resource to statement, where Z overrated len0 and NZ overrated len0. Choice H. Summarize. N cold count, Z cold count IF equals a 0, by service principal ID resource to statement, where NZ equals is N. Summarize. N cold count, Z cold count IF equals a 0, and Z cold Z overrated len0, and Z cold Z overrated len0, by service principal ID resource to statement, where Z overrated len0 and NZ overrated len0. Summarize. N cold count, Z cold count IF equals a 0, and Z cold Z overrated len0, by service principal ID, where NZ overrated len0. Lock in your answer. The correct mapping is requirement 1 maps to H, record 1, support plus, summarize, N close count, Z tot count if restup type equals 0, and Z tot count if rigid body not equal 0, by service principal ID resource permissions, support plus, where NZ equals N, record 2, support plus, summarize, N close count, Z tot count if rule equals 0, and Z tot sent if interrupt type equals 0, by service principal ID resource displaying, support plus, where Z a gradient 0 and NZ a gradient 0. Record 3. Support plus, summarize, N close count, Z close sif, requirement 0, and Z tot count if recursive type equals 0, by service principal ID, support plus, where NZ a gradient 0. Requirement 2 maps to F. Record 1. Support plus, summarize, N close count, Z tot count if range type equals 0, and Z tot sent if retraint not equals 0, by service principal ID, support plus, where NZ a gradient 0. Record 2. Support plus, summarize, N close count, z.countif incident type equals 0, and z.customIf production equals 0 by service principal ID resource dismaining support plus, where nz equals n. Record 3. Support plus, summarize, n close count, z.z aggressive write type equals 0, and z.countdown equals 0 by service principal ID resource diameter. Support plus, where z a gradient 0 and nz a gradient 0. Requirement 3 maps to D. Record 1. Support plus, summarize, n close count, z.countif rescan type equals 0, and z.countif regraded type equals 0 by service principal ID. Support plus, where nz a gradient 0. Record 2. Support plus, summarize, n close 0, and z.selif regraded type equals 0 by service principal ID resource dismaining. Support plus, where z a gradient 0 and nz a gradient 0. Record 3. Support plus, summarize, n close count, z.register type equals 0, and z.countif regraded type equals 0 by service principal ID resource displacement, where nz equals n. Requirement 4 maps to A. Record 1. Support plus, summarize, n close count, z.seekcos if resident type equals 0, and z.countif regraded type equals 0, and z.countif regraded type equals 0, and z.countif regraded type equals 0 by service principal ID resource displacement, and z.countif regraded type equals 0 by service principal ID. Requirement 4 maps to A. Requirement 4 maps to A. Support plus, n close count, z.ccount and not equals 0, and z.countif regraded type equals 0 by service principal ID, where nz a gradient 0. Record 3. Support plus, summarize, n close count, z.countif regraded type equals 0, and z.countif by service principal ID resource displacement, where nz equals n. Requirement 5 maps to G. Record 1. Support plus, summarize, n close count, z.countif resident type equals 0, and z.countif regraded type equals 0 by service principal ID resource displacement, where nz equals n. Record 2. Support plus, summarize, n close c, z.countif equals 0, and z.countif regraded type equals 0 by service principal ID, where nz a graded 0. Record 3. Support plus, summarize, n close count, z.countif 0, and z.countif regraded type equals 0 by service principal ID resource displacement, where z a graded 0 and nz a gradient 0. The 8 plan vectors have pairwise Hamming distance at least 2. For every accepted plan and each record position, one of the 3 unused diagonal plans has the same mechanism at that position. Consequently, one record never identifies an accepted plan before assignments or for any possible final target. At least 2 bounded record results must be reconciled. Exam clue: use at least 2 retained group outputs to identify a plan. Every single record mechanism overlaps an unused plan. Question 40 of 45. Select one answer. AdventureWorks engineers use existing Windows Hello for Business credentials to access deployment applications. Some engineers forget their PINs. The identity team must let them reset a forgotten PIN without deleting the Windows Hello container, keys, or certificates already used by those applications. Which configuration should the team implement? Option A. Issue each affected engineer a temporary access pass and delete the existing Windows Hello credential. Option B. Enable Microsoft Entra self-service password reset and treat the password reset as a Windows Hello PIN recovery. Option C. Register the Microsoft PIN Reset Service Production and Microsoft PIN Reset Client Production applications and enable the PIN recovery policy on the Windows clients. Option D. Use the default destructive PIN reset process without additional configuration. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is C. Register the Microsoft PIN Reset Service Production and Microsoft PIN Reset Client Production applications, and enable the PIN recovery policy on the Windows clients. Microsoft documents non-destructive PIN reset as preserving the Windows Hello for Business container and keys while changing the PIN that authorizes key use. It requires the Microsoft PIN Reset Service, including its 2 tenant applications and client policy that enables PIN recovery. The default destructive process re-provisions the credential and therefore does not meet the preservation requirement. Exam clue: a forgotten PIN and a lost key are different incidents. If the existing Windows Hello keys must survive, look for non-destructive PIN recovery rather than credential deletion and re-enrollment. Question 41 of 45. Select one answer. Fabricam uses Microsoft Entra Connect Sync with OU-based filtering. The on-premises App Production Operator Security Group is assigned to an enterprise application in Microsoft Entra ID. An AD administrator renamed the explicitly selected OU that contains the group from app groups to workload groups. After the next full import, Synchronization Service Manager shows the group as a staged delete for Microsoft Entra ID, but no export has run. Fabricam must preserve the synchronized group and its existing enterprise application assignment. What should the identity engineer do? Option A. Create a cloud-only group with the same display name and assign that new group to the enterprise application. Option B. Keep exports paused, run the Microsoft Entra Connect wizard, and reselect workload groups for domain and OU filtering. Then run the required import and full synchronization, and verify the pending export before resuming exports. Option C. Create a custom outbound synchronization rule that forces every security group in the forest into Microsoft Entra ID. Option D. Export the staged delete, reselect workload groups afterward, and rely on the next synchronization cycle to restore the group and its application assignment. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is B. Keep exports paused, run the Microsoft Entra Connect wizard, and reselect workload groups for domain and OU filtering, then run the required import and full synchronization, and verify the pending export before resuming exports. Microsoft documents that OU-based filtering stores the distinguished name of each explicitly selected OU. Renaming that OU changes its distinguished name, so a later full import can treat its objects as out of scope and stage deletions. Because the export has not run, the engineer can pause exports, reselect the renamed OU in the Connect wizard, recalculate synchronization, and inspect the pending export before resuming. This repairs the scope boundary while preserving the existing synchronized group and application assignment. Exam clue. When a full import stages unexpected deletions after an OU rename, inspect the saved OU scope before touching cloud assignments. Repair and verify sync scope before export. Object continuity is the key evidence. Question 42 of 45. Arrange all actions from first to last. Fabricam currently reaches payroll.corp.fabricam.com on TCP 443 through quick access. An active connector group and the private access traffic profile already work. A test migration showed that adding the same destination to a new per-app global secure access enterprise application before assigning users blocked access. The per-app segment took priority over quick access, and the existing quick access assignments did not transfer. Fabricam has a non-nested payroll app users group containing all authorized users. Order the actions for the production migration so that entitlement exists before the per-app route takes priority, and the obsolete broad quick access route is removed only after validation. Items in the displayed order. Item A. Create the Global Secure Access Enterprise application, select the active connector group, and save it without adding the payroll application segment yet. Item B. Add payroll.corp.fabricam.com on TCP 443 as the per-app segment. Allow the configuration to synchronize and use the client policy tester to verify that the per-app rule is active for an assigned user. Item C. Assign payroll app users directly to the new enterprise application. Item D. Remove the payroll destination from quick access after the assigned user validation succeeds. Lock in your answer. The correct order is Step 1. Create the Global Secure Access Enterprise application. Select the active connector group and save it without adding the payroll application segment yet. Step 2. Assign payroll app users directly to the new enterprise application. Step 3. Add payroll.corp.fabricam.com on TCP 443 as the per-app segment. Allow the configuration to synchronize, and use the client policy tester to verify that the per-app rule is active for an assigned user. Step 4. Remove the payroll destination from quick access after the assigned user validation succeeds. A per-app global secure access application is the granular private access boundary. The application must first exist without an overlapping segment, so quick access remains active. Users or a supported group are then assigned directly because quick access assignments do not transfer, and nested groups are unsupported. Adding the segment afterward gives the enterprise app priority only after entitlement exists. Policy tester verifies the active rule, and the redundant quick access segment is removed last, as Microsoft recommends. Exam clue. During quick access to per-app migration, treat route priority and app entitlement as separate dependencies. Create the app, establish direct entitlement, publish and verify the higher priority segment, then retire the broad route. Question 43 of 45. Select one answer. AdventureWorks uses Microsoft Entra Privileged Identity Management, PIM, for application administration. An application identity engineer has an eligible tenant-scoped cloud application administrator assignment. The engineer is not an owner of the application. When the engineer tries to update single sign-on settings for an enterprise application, access is denied. In PIM, My Roles list the assignment under Eligible Assignments and list no active assignment. What should the engineer do? Option A. Activate the eligible Cloud Application Administrator role in PIM. Option B, request the application developer role and leave the eligible assignment inactive. Option C, request the contributor role on the Azure subscription that hosts the application. Option D, become an owner of the security group that is assigned to the enterprise application. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is A, activate the eligible Cloud Application Administrator role in PIM. Microsoft documents that Cloud Application Administrator can manage app registrations and enterprise applications except App Proxy. PIM eligibility alone does not add the active role assignment. An eligible user must activate the role before performing privileged actions. Because My Roles shows this assignment only as eligible and no active assignment exists, activating it supplies the effective directory role authority required for the stated task. Exam clue: separate role capability from role state. A role can be correctly scoped and capable, yet grant no current permissions when its PIM assignment is only eligible. Look for an active assignment before changing scope or adding unrelated ownership or Azure RBAC. Question 44 of 45. Select one answer. AdventureWorks uses Microsoft Entra Connect Sync 2.4 with password hash synchronization, PHS. Self-service password reset and password write-back are enabled. Ordinary on-premises password changes synchronize successfully. An administrator resets an application engineer's AADS password and selects User must change password at next logon. The engineer cannot use the temporary password to sign in to a cloud application. Diagnostics show that the temporary password was not synchronized, and user force password change on logon enabled is false. The engineer must be prompted to change the temporary password at cloud sign-in. What should the administrator do? Option A, put the Microsoft Entra Connect server in staging mode and trigger a full synchronization. Option B, install another pass-through authentication agent and keep the PHS feature settings unchanged. Option C, enable cloud password policy for password synced users enabled and leave user force password change on logon enabled false. Option D, enable user force password change on logon enabled and then reset the AADS password again with user must change password at next logon selected. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is D. Enable user force password change on logon enabled, and then reset the AADS password again with user must change password at next logon selected. Microsoft documents that an AADS password marked user must change password at next logon is temporary. With PHS enabled, but user force password change on logon enabled disabled, the sync client does not attempt to synchronize that temporary password. Enabling the feature allows PHS to synchronize an admin reset temporary password and apply the force change prompt. Generating a new reset after enabling it gives PHS a new password change to process. The stated SSPR and password write-back prerequisite also satisfies Microsoft's caution for this feature. Exam clue: when normal PHS succeeds, but only an admin reset temporary password fails, inspect both the AD force change flag and user force password change on logon enabled. Do not confuse temporary password handling with cloud expiration policy, PTA availability, or staging mode. Question 45 of 45. Match each observation to one configuration change. Each configuration change is used once. AdventureWorks is reconciling access and inventory controls for enterprise applications used by deployment teams. The tenant has Microsoft Entra ID P1. The portfolio custom security attribute already exists, and the attribute administrator has the required role. Match each observation to the smallest configuration change that resolves it. Requirements. Requirement 1. Administrators must classify Build Dashboard as portfolio equals Tier 1, and then find it by that business-specific value in the Enterprise Application Inventory. Requirement 2. An unassigned engineer does not see Deploy Portal in My Apps, but can still sign in through the application's direct SAML URL. Only assigned users must be allowed to sign in. Requirement 3. Deploy Operators is assigned to Release Console. Direct members can sign in, but engineers who belong only to a group nested inside Deploy Operators cannot sign in. Target Bank. Choice A. Set assignment required to Yes on the Enterprise application. Choice B. Assign the affected engineers directly to the Enterprise application instead of relying on nested group membership. Choice C. Assign the portfolio custom security attribute value Tier 1 to the Enterprise application. Lock in your answer. The correct mapping is Requirement 1 maps to C. Assign the portfolio custom security attribute value Tier 1 to the Enterprise application. Requirement 2 maps to A. Set assignment required to Yes on the Enterprise application. Requirement 3 maps to B. Assign the affected engineers directly to the Enterprise application instead of relying on nested group membership. The evidence points to 3 separate Enterprise application control layers. Assignment required governs whether unassigned users can sign in directly. Group assignment grants application access only through supported direct membership, rather than nested groups. A custom security attribute supplies business-specific application metadata that administrators can use as an inventory filter. App Registration Ownership, or API, design changes are unnecessary for all 3 observations. Exam clue: separate sign-in enforcement, principal assignment scope, and application classification. Assignment required controls eligibility. Nested groups do not expand an enterprise app assignment, and custom security attributes provide filterable business metadata. You completed all 45 questions. Group any misses by objective, identify the requirement you overlooked, and answer again from the mechanism rather than from a memorized keyword. Thanks for practicing with WebLizard CertLab. Review your week objectives, revisit the complete exam clues, and continue with the next SC-300 practice exam when you are ready.